let me ask you again in the way that I've always spoken to you, right through the camera. What do you think? Are we friends? Hey, hi. Here you are. Come on in. Why don't you, why don't you have a seat? I made hot chocolate this time. Here you go. Yeah, so there's just something I think we should talk about. What are we? I mean, this relationship. What is this? What are we doing? Because, I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, right? I mean, when I first met you, it was what, like 20 years ago, more than that? And I was just some dude pretending that he could hear you through a camera, and you were just this little kid sitting on the carpet, believing that I could. Except I couldn't. Not really. But somehow we were pretending, and it felt real, didn't it? I mean, it did to me. Except it wasn't. Not exactly. And now everything's different, right? Because we're grown up, and the screen has gotten much smaller, but somehow this connection has gotten much bigger. And we're still doing it. Right? And I'm not trying to overcomplicate a podcast, but don't you ever think about that? Don't you ever wonder what it is we're doing? And how much of it is real? I guess what I'm really asking is, are you really my friend? Okay. All right. Let's go. Okay, so Dr. Rebecca Tukachinsky Forster is a media psychologist researcher and professor at Chapman University, where she studies how we form emotional bonds with people who aren't really there. From beloved TV show hosts to social media personalities, she's one of the world's leading experts on parasocial relationships. They are the one-sided connections that develop with performers and characters and public figures. Now, her research explores how media shapes our sense of intimacy, morality, and empathy, and what happens when that line between the real and the performed and the mediated starts to blur. She's written extensively about the psychological consequences of these connections, including how they can both comfort and confuse us, and also what it is they reveal about us and our deep sort of social instincts to connect. Ooh, and she's here. Hello, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great.
Good to
It's
see you.
I'm really excited to talk to you today. So thank you so much for being here. So when we talk about a parasocial relationship, what are we actually describing?
So, parasocial relationship is an imaginary relationship. It's a feeling of intimacy and closeness and bonding with a media personality
Mm-hmm.
or someone that we don't actually know in real life, but we feel like we know them, usually through the media. And it's something that can evolve over time. It's something that um, can be evolved through parasocial interaction, which is another term. So parasocial interaction is this illusion of a give and take between the media personality and the media consumer. And that's actually something that you are the master of. You do that a lot, right? Every time when you look directly into the camera to maintain eye contact with the viewers, when you ask them questions and pause and wait for them to contemplate, every time when you're like, cheers, and I'm making tea, do you want some? You do that all the time. So those create this feeling that he sees me back. This is the interaction part. And like those repeated interactions, you don't have to have them. You can develop a relationship without that. But this breaking the fourth wall is one of the devices to foster that experience.
Yes, that's the primary device that I have been using over and over again for 30 years. The way I've always described it to myself, a parasocial relationship, is that it's feeling something is real in a shared space that is not, right? That's the way that I've always made it make sense to me, because it recognizes both sides. It says this is not real, but the feeling is real, right? And I really wanted to.
I like that. Yes.
Yeah, and I really wanted to talk about this. We really wanted to talk to you about this because it made sense to me when you were 5, right? And you were sitting on your grandma's carpet and you were pointing out clues to me. It was an illusion then. It was a trick then, but it was in service of curriculum, and it all made sense because it was educational children's television. But now we're doing it still, 20 some years later, and we're adults, and we understand that I can't really hear what's on the other side of the screen. We understand that this is, as you say, a highly mediated relationship, and yet we're investing in it in ways that are emotional, in ways that feel very real for me too. And I've just always wondered, what the hell are we doing? You know, is this a net positive thing, or is this just a really highly dysfunctional use of media? That's where my brain goes, you know. That's my concern. And I'm less interested in like dismantling some kind of bond that is there than I am in carefully examining it with you today, you know. So I don't know. That was a long statement. I don't know what the question is. I guess my question is, are there benefits to this, or are we doing something bad?
Of course, there are benefits to it. And the first one that you mentioned, that you did it in service of serving educational content for children. Like we learn best through relationships. And there are numerous studies about the benefits of parasocial relationships for modeling and promoting good causes. I have to confess, I'm too old to, grow up and watching you, and my kids are too young for that. So I'm kind of the lost generation that I didn't have to experience you firsthand, but I know so much about your show because I use it in my class as an example. It's Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Sesame Street, and all of those, and Dora the Explorer. They are all great examples of very well created media that was very thoughtful about engaging children. And in an ideal world, there would be an adult in their room doing that with them or talking to them like that. But it's not a realistic expectation for everyone. You were able to bring that caring adult figure into the living rooms of those children and create a relationship with them through which they can learn. They can learn their letters and numbers, but also build their character and soothe themselves and all of those positive effects that a real relationship could deliver, but realistically couldn't. And you were there as a surrogate. So that was a very important role. And it continues into adulthood because, as you pointed out, now your original viewers are adults. They no longer think that you live inside the TV set as they might have at the age of 3. I think that today's children grow in a different media environment and maybe they don't have that experience. But young studies from the 80s and 90s would show that preschool children would really think that the TV is a box and that contains inside of it Sesame Street that continues to live. All the characters continue doing what they're doing when the TV is off. Mm-hmm. So the TV set is just like a magic window into, those real personalities that continue living physically inside the box or some magical place that you can pick through the TV. So you grow up and you no longer believe that, but you can still engage in that game. So it's maybe takes more suspension of disbelief to do that, but you can still reap some of those benefits. So you can still use parasocial relationships to promote good causes. For example, Angelina Jolie with her experience, right, when she was promoting genetic testing for breast cancer, gene susceptibility, right? She made this op-ed and it made a big splash. And research has shown that parasocial relationships with her was the biggest, most important factor in people actually going and searching for information about that. Parasocial relationships with media personalities promoted various positive effects on questions of health, tolerance towards other social groups. It's an important tool in promoting positive, more harmonious intergroup relationships by developing a relationship with, for example, let me restart. One of the ways that we know in psychology to promote positive intergroup relationships is by developing a positive relationship with a member of that other group. Because sometimes it's the lack of knowledge, but also the anxiety that comes with this lack of knowledge and the negative stereotypes that you are familiar with that prevent developing those positive intergroup relationships. So sometimes it just takes having a good experience with one group member that is different from you and having it in a positive setting, a collaborative setting. The truth is that a lot of people live in very segregated communities. They don't have a lot of firsthand experiences with members of the groups they don't like. All the information they get is negative, or the experiences they have firsthand are negative. Mm-hmm. Media is that magic window that allows you to be friends with someone who is different from you. And we know that under certain conditions, this positive parasocial relationship with a member of a different group can generalize to the group at large.
Okay, raise your hand if you've ever tried to real quick hire someone and then just found yourself staring at like a gazillion resumes. Yeah, no thanks. Well, if you're hiring, here's the good news. You can now review all these resumes and applications faster, thanks to ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter has a new feature that instantly shows you the most interested and qualified candidates first, which is super helpful. And now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/alive. Candidates can tell you in their own words why they're interested in your job, letting you get a feel for their personality. So cut through the standard and get to the standouts with ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/alive. That's ZipRecruiter.com/alive. Meet your match on ZipRecruiter. The other night, I'm trying to buy something late, like 1 a.m., and everything's in the cart, and I'm all ready to go, and I realize I have no idea what my password is or what ancient email address it's associated with. And then I see it, the purple button. Yes, that means one tap. Done. No scouring the universe for a password from 2016. Just check out. That's Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. with all the major household brands like Allbirds and Death Wish Coffee, which I love. So if you're building something, Shopify gives you templates to create something that actually looks like your brand. And it has built-in AI tools to help write product descriptions. Everything's in one place. Inventory, payments, analytics, no juggling tabs. See less carts go abandoned and more sales go with Shopify and their Shop Pay button. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/alive. Go to shopify.com/alive. That's shopify.com/alive. I still bump against this idea. I mean, I hear what you're saying about the positive benefits that this kind of connection can create, right? I do see that, but I still kind of worry. I do worry because I've been creating this and investing in this and cultivating this for so long, and I do feel like I am perhaps inviting people to invest in an illusion, in something that is false, in a way that is real. So that's where I think there might be danger. At least that's the part where I get nervous. Is it makes sense for me, Rebecca, when it's kids. Like I know that kids, I know how they invest in the television and in Santa Claus and in all of these things. I understand that.
Yes.
But as an adult, to be investing in something illusory as if it is real over and over again doesn't sound like a great idea to me. Yeah. So for me, it's the whole point of this, what we're doing right now, and as I'm staring at this camera right now, as though I can actually see you, is to level set this and make it more of an honest frame.
I understand where your concern is coming from. And I would say maybe it is justified for a very tiny percent of people who have other challenges. And for them, drawing those distinctions is difficult. But I think most adults can responsibly engage in suspension of disbelief. It's not much different from going to a horror movie and experiencing genuine fear and from something that is they know is not real. So I think this is within reasonable levels of suspension of disbelief when you do it with adults. And some of the benefits can be real. Like one of the benefits of parasocial relationships is that it's emotion. It has benefits from like a social emotional well-being perspective. So for individuals, starting with, I'll give Mr. Rogers as an example, with children, there is this research on how children that are put in a situation that is hostile, they would seek Mr. Rogers for regulating their mood and feeling better. Like they have this person that looks at them and says, "Want you to be my neighbor? And I want, things that I want to be friends with you, and you are very special, and you are my friend." And that's very reassuring. And that adults experience that too. Adults have that feeling too. So there is research that shows how thinking about your favorite celebrity or writing a letter, like not sending it, but just like kind of mentally going through this process of thinking about your favorite celebrity, has psychological boosts for you, especially if you are like experiencing some social difficulties in that moment, or you feel worse about yourself in that moment. So you're kind of cheering up someone as if you were their friend, maybe not to the same extent, but has same characteristics to it.
I still wonder if all of that good is possible because someone is in a healthy way investing in the parasocial relationship with a suspension of disbelief that is appropriate. Isn't it also possible to overdo that? You know, aren't there examples of when a parasocial relationship becomes very unhealthy?
Well, I mean, there are plenty of famous examples of stalkers and celebrity
Yeah.
stalkers and people who would hurt, like from Mark Chapman murdering John Lennon to right to John Hinckley, who wanted to impress Jodie Foster and draw her attention to him by trying to assassinate President Reagan. So there are famous examples of that. But it's not true that a regular, normal parasocial relationship just becomes too intense and anyone will become a dangerous stalker and assassin. It's some people have mental illness, some people have real mental health issues, and they can be manifested in different ways. And one way in which they can be manifested is in this way. If it wasn't in this way, it probably will be in something else.
Yeah, but it seems there's got to be some room between, okay, this is regular fandom, this is parasocial and a stalker. I'm interested in between the parasocial and stalker phase, I think.
Yes.
For example, people say things to me all the time. Like they say, "Hey Steve, you raised me." Which of course I did not.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I always assume, well, that's just hyperbole. They're just saying that, of course I didn't. But then I wonder, and then people say, Steve, I watch you on the internet and I've seen you do short form TikToks and you are the most wholesome person in the world. And I think, well, that's certainly not true. and then they say, you are my safe space. And I'm thinking, what kind of relationship am I cultivating here? Because none of those things are true. None of them are. And if this person is centering any part of their life around that, am I not doing harm by perpetuating that relationship?
I see what you mean. And I just have to quickly give a shout out to Dr. Gail Stever, who is researching parasocial attachment, which is kind of a higher level of connecting to media personalities where you seeing them as your safe harbor, like that safe space.
Yeah.
When it comes with stronger separation and anxiety as well. Like think about attachment, like attachment to your caregiving figure growing up. And again, there are a lot of healing components to that. Like if that's what helps the person to get through their chemotherapy, I'm giving examples from her research on that, where parasocial attachment it has a very strong positive effect on the psychic of the individuals.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, yes, it is fictional, and you feel like people completely lost the distinction between the fiction and reality. And I hear you. I'll give you even more extreme example of that if you wish. Even when people look at fictional characters and actors, I would say every adult will clearly know the distinction between the two and know that an actor is performing. It's just their job to deliver those lines in a compelling way. But nonetheless, the characters that the actor plays influences how people perceive the actor's own personality. So there have been a number of studies showing it again and again. People just blur those lines. They don't maintain a clear distinction between them. So of course it will be, and that's about when you know it's fiction. So of course, when you are supposedly representing yourself on the podcast or on the short, right, on TikTok, you it's harder for people to remember that this is a certain personality that you're playing. That's not the Steve that you see when you watch TikTok is not really the personality Steve that you would know if you were Steve's friend. But it's hard to maintain that distinction because, again, even if you were playing a completely fictional character with a different name and false beard, people will still have trouble separating them. So are you doing something unhealthy to people by fostering those relationships? Again, I think for most people, it's not. It's, part of it is entertainment, and part of it has a real positive effect on people, be it their well-being, or be it if you choose to promote positive causes, you have that power, you can leverage it to do good. Yeah. Can it also have some undesirable negative consequences? Like everything in life, probably yes.
Yeah.
But again, probably it will be for people who are already, have other issues. You weren't their issue. You might have been the manifestation of that issue that they have.
I get to a point though where I think, okay, this technology that we were talking about, which is almost entirely narrative driven, right? Which really relies on influence and stories and things. If we're relying more and more and more on that, does it become the baseline? Is it going to become what we expect from a human relationship? And if we're relying on a parasocial relationship, a quasi-real relationship to be a safe space, are we less likely to look for an actually safe space in each other in reality?
That's an excellent question. And I have two things. I have a positive thing to say about it and more of a cautionary tale to tell about it. So on the upside, since the 1980s, maybe even 70s, researchers, the genesis of empirical research on parasocial relationship came from this concern that do people develop parasocial relationships instead of social relationships? Does it replace social relationships? And they wanted to, so researchers were looking for an association between parasocial relationship and loneliness, or parasocial relationship and personality types that are more likely to have unsatisfying relationships. So people who are more it's called avoidant attachment style, people who don't relate to others and trust others and create intimacy in relationships, people who are shy. And time again, this has been debunked. They couldn't find that effect. What they did find is that people who form stronger, healthier relationships in real life are also more prone to developing parasocial relationships. So that avoidant types that can't relate in real life also don't relate to media personalities. People who have secure attachment, who have enjoy intimacy in relationships, and also the anxious people, the people who are like clingy in relationships and don't let you go and are like overly attached, so to speak, they're also the ones that develop the stronger parasocial attachment. So really the social and the parasocial relationships kind of mimic the social. It's an extension of your social connection. It's not a replacement for them. It's a supplement on top of your regular relationship. And it does come in handy, however, when people don't have access to social relationships. So there's research on youth during COVID shutdowns, right, and lockdowns, and during the LGBTQ youth that don't have access to other LGBTQ youth, again, especially during COVID, and how, but not just during COVID, just individuals who don't have social relationships that can fulfill those needs, and how parasocial relationships come to address some of those needs. But again, it's not that people are satisfied with them instead. It's just people who are social or seek social connection also seek parasocial connection. Probably, again, because it uses the same infrastructure in our brain. So if you are wired for social connection, you connect for real, and in the media, it's not media instead of social. It's in addition to.
Okay, so I might just be...
So that's the positive thing.
I might just be worrying too much, right? Because I mean, this all comes from like the pandemic, really.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
during the pandemic, I did
Yeah.
a little shout out
Yeah.
video,
Yeah.
and I said, "Hey, how you guys doing?" I didn't say much,
Yeah.
right? I just kind of said, "Hey, still thinking about you, never forgot
Yeah.
you," and it was a
Yeah.
very simple message, and it blew up. And that what that kind of said to me was, "Wow, there's a very intense emotional need out there." And that's when I started paying
Yes.
attention to
Yes.
loneliness as it relates to technology. And I started to develop all these opinions without really knowing what I'm talking about, that it's technology that's making us lonely. And then I thought, well, if I'm cultivating this relationship, and I have been for 30 years, through the very technology that makes us lonelier, am I putting the cure for cancer in a cigarette or something? Am I using the wrong device to try to do the right thing and therefore making everything worse? And maybe I'm just totally overthinking all of that, you know.
So I have to add to that, the nostalgic parasocial relationship, which is what you're describing, like you tapped into that, like you're representing to that audience, this connection to some nostalgic moment. That form of parasocial relationship is unique in how it really can bring some gratification and enhance positive emotions, and you're not exploiting it. It's a good thing. But with that, I also have the negative side. So I can speak to some of the things that maybe will keep you a little more concerned. But
Please
that
do.
is, I studied a lot of romantic parasocial relationships. That was
Hmm.
one of my interests, like celebrity crushes and things like that. And I found that, and one of the questions that I was looking into is a little bit like what you were asking, like, is it healthy to develop your idea of what a relationship is based on your parasocial relationship? Because most Americans, based on my studies, about 80% of Americans have had at least one parasocial romantic relationship in their life, and about half the people had multiples.
Hmm.
And most people report their first one to happen in their tweens or early teen years. Uh, Usually around the same time they start having sexual fantasies, but before they actually have their first romantic relationship.
Hmm.
So that's a very important first experience. And it's true for both boys and girls, even though when you say celebrity crushes, most people think it's a teenage girl thing. It's not. It's exactly the same for both sexes. I looked just at teens, ages 13 and up. And you can see that the more potent their parasocial relationship is with the personality that they have a crush on, the more they endorse idealized romantic beliefs, like those unrealistic romantic expectations of like love at first sight, and everyone has love wins under all circumstances, and everyone has their perfect romantic partner. You just have to find that one person. And I was wondering if that kind of translates to less positive experiences in actual romantic relationships.
Hmm.
So I was looking at college students recalling their parasocial relationships growing up. And you can see, yes, again, the more potent their parasocial relationship is, the more unrealistic romantic expectations they have. And in turn, the less satisfied they are in their current romantic relationship. And their perception of their current romantic partner is not as high. So essentially, their current romantic partner doesn't live up to the same ideal that they could paint in their head when they had a parasocial romantic relationship with that celebrity or that character. Now, it's a correlational study. It's not causal. I cannot argue causality. It's
Hmm.
entirely possible that just the romantic people are more likely to also
Right.
develop crushes. It doesn't necessarily mean that the crush led to development of those romantic beliefs, but I also did some interviews with people trying to understand more like the contents of the parasocial relationship. Like if it's all a fantasy, like what do you fantasize about? What is the content of that experience? And people fantasize about mostly good things. So they fantasize about, being picked out of the crowd. Like there are like all those fans and he saw me and picked me. Meet cutes and all sorts of
Hmm.
celebrating Christmas together with grandma. Nobody's thinking about fantasizing about having a fight or about dishes, like or like those mundane things that happen in everyday life. Those who do fantasize about challenges, they daydream about unrealistic resolutions for it. It's like Justin Bieber will be running down the street after me, begging for me to take him back. So very maladaptive strategies for conflict resolution. So you could say that yes, like those kind of fantasies are not healthy preparation for engaging in a real relationship. But at the same time, it does serve a particular purpose for the individuals who engage in them. In the big scheme of things, it is helpful. It is better for people to have this imaginary playground and kind of through imaginary play start figuring out who they are, like what is their romantic self is, what is their sexual self is. It's better for them to do it, fancifully this way than, a 12-year-old starting dating someone to figure that out, right? That you learn about yourself through this process and you develop yourself and prepare yourself for actual relationships later. And, later in life, you'll figure out that that was not a good conflict resolution strategy, but it still gave you something you couldn't have otherwise.
Right.
People who engage in those relationships in other points in life, for example, I found that women who become moms for the first time and they want to go back to reconnect to their identity as something other than being a mother. Like
Right.
They want to reconnect to their sexuality. They want to reconnect to their romantic self. Oftentimes a parasocial relationship is like that first bridge. I interviewed women who underwent divorce or lost their husband, and they couldn't fathom the idea of dating again. And again, the parasocial relationship was like their first step to kind of even imagine themselves being romantic or sexual before they were able to move on and embark in a real relationship.
I see.
So again, it's not to say that there can't be examples of like pathological ways of doing that, but for most people, it is a healthy step.
Lately, I've been traveling a lot, like probably too much, which means airports and weird meals and absolutely no routine, no consistency, just chaos. But there is one thing I've been trying to keep consistent, and that's AG1. AG1 is a daily health drink clinically shown to support gut health and fill in common nutrition gaps. It's got 75 plus ingredients, including 5 clinically studied probiotic strains. So you're covering a lot, really, in one simple step. It's kind of non-negotiable. I wake up in a hotel, whatever city I'm in, and boom, it's one scoop, 20 seconds, and I'm done. AG1 simplifies all of it. It's multivitamins, probiotics, superfoods, antioxidants, all of that. It's daily support for energy, gut health, and immune health without making your life complex and harder. So go to drinkag1.com/alive and get an AG1 flavor sampler and a bottom of vitamin D3 plus K2 for free with your AG1 welcome kit with your first AG1 subscription order. That's a $72 value, yours free, only while supplies last. Go to drinkag1.com/alive. I see that. I see that. What I'm hearing over and over again, and is that this is about moderation and contextualization, and that this is about this can be part of a healthy, balanced breakfast, as long as everyone is contextualizing it accurately and understands what's going on. Because I can easily see, just to use myself as an example again, I get so nervous when people say all these superlatives. Oh, you're this wholesome Mr. Rogers or whatever, that I'm clearly not. I just worry that, that's a bar in my personal life that I do not meet. And if I did have a real relationship with these people, they would only be disappointed because they've idealized this thing to a degree that would lead to an unrealistic expectation. And I guess that's it for me is, I just question all the idealization leading to unrealistic expectation in the world that is not para or quasi, But what I'm hearing is that this can be okay if it is contextualized in a healthy, realistic way. I get that now. And just to make this less about me for a minute, and then we'll get back to me. But you can have parasocial relationships with things that aren't celebrities, right? You can have parasocial relationships with religious concepts even, right? Or didn't I hear you talk about people have parasocial relationships with works of art and statues and things like that. So people can use this projection outside of media, right?
Yes, one of the things that I think people think about parasocial when lay people think about parasocial relationships, like lay, I mean, like when non-scholars think about parasocial relationships, they oftentimes think, oh, social media, and that's not an example of parasocial relationship. On social media,
Oh,
you can actually really have a real interaction with people, but and parasocial relationships date back to antiquity. So you could have parasocial relationships not just through media. When I did historical research on parasocial relationships, the first example of parasocial relationships I could find goes back to ancient Rome, to 55 AD. So juvenile satire about women being unfaithful. And as an example, he has a whole poem about women having crushes and parasocial relationships with rhetoricians and singers of that time.
mm-hmm.
It's not a modern phenomenon. It's
Right.
not necessarily media based.
Yeah.
You could develop parasocial relationship with other entities for
Mm-hmm.
sure, with fictional characters, and to some extent, you can say that parasocial relationships is a continuum. Um, because you can have a parasocial relationship with a real person like yourself. Now, obviously, your media persona is not identical to your actual persona, but it's a certain facet of that personality, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to, say, a fictional character or a cartoon that doesn't have an actual reference in the real world. And on the other end of it, it's not too far-fetched to say that a teenage girl that has a crush on the quarterback, senior quarterback in her school that she never spoke to and only saw him, uh, on the field. She also has some sort of parasocial relationship with her. And as a matter of fact, all of our relationships, even with our close others, even in our real relationships and our actual social relationships, have an imaginary component to them, right? When you are in a relationship with someone and you are to some extent, you imagine who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And you have an idea of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are talking to them in your head, when you are rehearsing that speech that you're going to deliver to them, you are engaging a little bit in parasocial relationship. So there is a very, very small imaginary component, even in relationships with our close others, with our significant others, with our parents or peers. And there is a lot more of it in our relationships with media personalities. But it is a continuum. And it kind of goes back to when we're talking about narratives and facts, like there is no clear fact. Everything is some representation of a fact. Even our actual relationships have an imaginary component to them.
Right. So walk me through real quick the difference between a parasocial relationship and just simple fandom, right? Because there is a difference there, right? What is that?
Yeah, it's a little tricky because, so first of all, fandom is not necessarily about a persona. Like you can be a fan of a show, you can be a Star Trek fan and not
Mm-hmm.
have an attachment to any particular character, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an important distinction. Now, within fandom of a particular character or celebrity, um, there is a very significant overlap between the two. I would say that not all parasocial relationships are fandom, because parasocial relationship is also a continuum in terms of like the intensity of the relationship and how much intimacy you have with, like, are you more of an acquaintance with them or a friend or more like a best friend, right? So you have degrees of intensity of your parasocial friendship. And we're only talking now about positive parasocial relationships. Parasocial relationships can be also negative, like your social relationships. So I would say fans of a particular media personality can usually would have some degree of parasocial relationship attached to that. But not all fandom is parasocial relationship, and not all parasocial relationship involve fandom.
I'm realizing through this conversation, Rebecca, that I am in a parasocial relationship with you every bit as much as you are in a parasocial relationship with me. And we talked a little bit about psychological needs and a desire for connection through story that people bring to these parasocial relationships. Well, hell, I'm doing that too. Big time. You know, I always say that I've always been kind of in a lonely sandwich. I've always been a loner. Like I've always been kind of a solitary person. And I think this is my way of connecting to something that does feel real because of a need that I have. And you were speaking earlier about people having a parasocial relationship with a media persona that does not accurately, symmetrically reflect who that person is in real life, right? But I think doing this podcast has been very much about presenting something closer to the real me for you to relate to, so that I feel like this is more real. You know, I started this whole podcast talking about your relationship to me, but I think that I think I'm seeing it the other way around now. I think I'm doing that. I'm investing in this parasocial relationship in a pretty big way, right? What's that about? What's it about for the ostensible object of the parasocial relationship? What's happening in my brain psychologically? You know, and is it different from what might be happening?
It's terribly understudied question. I'm dying to answer it. I would love to study that, but the problem is access. I need, if I would love to interview you, and
Let's do it.
yes, okay, we will. I would love to, because it's really understudied. There is a lot to unpack there, but that's exactly what myself and other colleagues of mine were always interested in understanding. Like, how does it feel for you to know that there are so many people who feel like they know you, but they don't actually know you? And how does it feel for you to perform for them and make self-disclosures about yourself? Because you were talking about how breaking the fourth wall is the device you're using, but the biggest device you are using to create parasocial relationships is when you're telling about, a death in your family that you went through, or, how did you feel when there were rumors about your death? And like when you're sharing those personal experiences about yourself, or how you live in the mountains or things like that, those personal bits of information is what really builds the relationship.
Exactly.
And what does it mean for you to disclose them?
Exactly. I mean, I was always thinking,
and it's like a little pieces of you.
Yeah. And why am I sharing those with strangers? What am I doing? What is that impulse to do that? You know, I did a one-man show last year, and I told stories on that stage that my best friends didn't know, and it felt hard and vulnerable and raw. And why am I doing that? And why am I doing this? And I read the comments on the TikTok page that I have, and some of it makes me cry, and some of it is so just profoundly, like, vulnerable that I just can't believe that anyone would share that. And I'm so moved by that, probably because I don't really have that kind of intimacy in my real life. I mean, I'm doing it right now. I'm confessing these things right now. So it has to be for me about a need for connection. And I think perhaps all of this concern, or much of this concern that I have about your side of this parasocial relationship, might just be projection. This has been a really great therapy session, actually, so far for me. But
it's not intended as a therapy, and I'm
I
the wrong
know, I
type
know,
of
I know.
doctor for that.
I know. That's another thing people say to me all the time that does, concern me. Rebecca, is people say, "Oh, Steve, you're our therapist." And I'm like, well, I got to correct that, because that is certainly not true. And that sounds unhealthy as an expectation, to cultivate. So, yeah, interesting stuff. So, I won't keep you here all day, although I could. I guess what I was trying to get at the beginning of this episode of this podcast was the reality of what we're doing. Is this real? How much of it is real? Is this relationship a friendship? Or not? What do you think?
Well, I think the way you presented it at the beginning really captured it. It's not real, but it feels real. Its effects are real. It's not
Mm-hmm.
friendship. It's not two-sided. It goes in one direction, or it's experienced. Even if you experience that as a relationship and your audience experiences it as a relationship, it's not a real give and take. So in that way, of course, it's not real. It's a pretend play for adults or for children. It's a make believe. It's a suspension of disbelief. But in some ways, on some level, it has real impact. It feels real. It engages you in a real way. It presses all the real buttons in your psychic. And it can have real effects on your attitudes, on your beliefs, on your mood, on your perception of self, in very real ways.
But what about when they end? What about when a parasocial relationship is over?
It hurts. It hurts a lot if you had a very strong parasocial relationship. They were invested in this relationship. It felt real, it felt meaningful, and now they lose that person, and it hurts very much. So it comes with a sense of loss, it comes with profound sadness. You can see communities of bands coming together to support each other through those times as well. It follows a lot of the same trajectories of grief that we experience in real life. Obviously, for most people, not to the same extent as experiencing loss in a real life relationship. But again, it echoes those experiences.
Yeah. It's actually really, really interesting for me to hear all of that, because the thing I actually hear most from people who used to watch Blue's Clues was, when you left, you traumatized me. And I always try to laugh that off, but
Yes.
but I can see now that especially for a child, that was the end of a meaningful parasocial relationship. And after I left Blue's Clues, I talk a lot about, there was a rumor in the internet that I died. And I felt like that was the end of my parasocial relationship with you. I don't know if that makes sense, but it felt to me like, oh, I guess it's over. You all think I'm dead. And I guess that, that felt like an unhealthy end to something valuable, something meaningful, not quite a friendship maybe, but something that was a connection and that was real in a way that matters. you know. Listen, this has been wonderful and revelatory to me. And it's really great, honestly, to talk about this stuff with someone who understands it and has studied it, because sometimes I really do feel like no one gets this weird thing. No one's doing this weird thing that I'm trying to do. And it does feel complicated, and it does feel meaningful in ways that are real, even though I know that it is not. And so this has been really, really great for me. And I really appreciate talking to you. And if you ever want to talk, if you ever need someone to study about the other side of things, I'm totally here for that. I'd love to talk about that. So, yeah.
I will absolutely gonna take you up on that.
Fantastic.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was such a joy to talk to you. I really enjoy meeting you
Yes,
and
me too.
sharing with you and your enthusiasm for it. And again, you are the master of doing parasocial relationships. So
I
it
guess
was
so.
when I got the first email inviting me to the show, I was like, this, I'm going to talk to the pro. So it's great.
Well, fantastic, Rebecca. Thank you so
Thanks.
much for stopping by. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Well, this is getting awfully meta. I wrote some stuff down. Our brains interpret people on screens the same way they interpret people in real life, at least initially, right? The same structures in our brain that manage intimacy and connection are at play when we connect through a screen, when we pretend that we're listening on this podcast. Parasocial relationships aren't necessarily bad. There are benefits. They can be part of a healthy, balanced breakfast. But it isn't harmless when we forget that we're pretending. The health of the illusion depends on remembering that there is one. Right. And parasocial relationships are, in fact, pretend. But the feelings they evoke and the impact that they have, those are real. Let's go. Oh, hey, I was just talking about you. All right, that's a big interview for us, really, for specifically us in the way we relate. So, after seeing that, let me ask you again, in the way that I've always spoken to you right through the camera. What do you think? Are we friends? Yeah, I mean, it's complicated to say the least. I mean, it's a question that I've taken really seriously. It's a question that I've been taking even more seriously in recent years, like since the first time a millennial approached me on the street and said, "Hey, are you Steve?" and immediately began to cry. And then tell me that when I left the show, they were traumatized. I used to laugh all that off, but now, not so much. So I ask myself that question all the time. Are we friends? And I want to say, no. We're not. Not really. I mean, we don't really know each other. You know me from Blue's Clues and from this podcast, but you don't know the me that is like freaking out in traffic and who isolates and who has always struggled to form romantic relationships and who is enormously frustrating and very easily frustrated. You don't know that guy. And that's most of it, really. And, I've never helped you carry a mattress up the stairs or picked you up from the airport, and we don't show up for each other in 3 dimensions when our parents are sick, like friends do. So I want to say no. But I can't. Because that doesn't feel honest either. I mean, this isn't nothing. It's like what Rebecca said. It's not real, but it presses real buttons and has real effects. And the effects of that do create a form of a relationship. And that relationship, whatever it is, has value. It's valuable to me. In fact, this relationship is one of the most valuable things in my life. So no, we're not technically friends, but I think the most accurate description I can think of for us is that we're people who don't know each other, choosing to treat each other as friends. And that's good shit. I'm sorry, but that is. I mean, think about it. Think about it. Like, I don't think this is naive. What if everybody did that? What if we treated the person who got on the elevator, whose face looks nothing like our face, whose politics confuse and nauseate us? What if we treated the stranger simply as a friend we've not yet met? How might that change, like, everything? Yeah, this is what I'm saying. And this is why I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for you, right? I get on this strange technology and I try to show up and speak honestly about things that are sometimes funny and sometimes really uncomfortable, and you listen. So thank you for the gift of your attention. I'm super glad that we're still friends who've not yet met. You look great. You do. Alive with Steve Burns is a Lemonada Media original. If you haven't subscribed to Lemonada Premium yet, now's the perfect time. You can listen to the show completely ad-free, plus you'll unlock exclusive bonus content from me as I reflect on this episode. Just press subscribe on Apple Podcasts, head to lemonadapremium.com to subscribe on any other app, or listen ad-free on Amazon Music with your Prime membership. That's lemonadapremium.com. Alive is hosted by me, Steve Burns, and produced by Jeremy Slutskin. Our editor is Christopher Champion Morgan. Our associate producer is Akshaz Tharabailu. Audio engineering by James Sparber. Lemonada's SVP of weekly programming is Steve Nelson. Executive producers are Jessica Cordova-Kramer, Stephanie Whittles-Wax, and me. We'll see you next week. And you look great, by the way.